mental health, and in residential care throughout the state. He joined them in 2006 and served as the policy analysis for that organization, then the associate director, and finally became the CEO of the organization in 2011, and has been able to balance much of the activities of the organizations and advocating for children, at the same time run a fairly substantial organization. He holds a BA and MA in political science from Ohio University, a certificate in executive specialization from the Ohio State University Fisher College of Business, and he is a Lean Six Sigma Green Belt. If anyone knows of Six Sigma, that's an impressive title to have. Mark is a leader in development of legislation as the association's leader. He advocates for a variety of areas for children, services to children, their caregivers, and the families that are involved in the child welfare system and the juvenile justice system. He serves on the Governance Council on Juvenile Justice, the Ohio Behavioral Health, Mental Health, Behavioral Health Integrated Task Force, the Ohio Family First Leadership Committee, and has in fact impacted significantly changes in our child welfare system. So Mark will be speaking regarding the impact on foster care during COVID and the challenges that it has. Mark, unmute yourself, and welcome to the Dublin Worthington Rotary Club.
Well, thank you very much, Jim, and thank you all for inviting me. I really appreciate this opportunity. So I actually live in the Westerville area. This time last year, I gave a similar presentation to the Westerville Rotary about the impact of the opioid crisis on foster care. Things definitely have changed, but we got even greater challenges these days. So I've known Jim, as he said, for a very long time. And for those of you that are familiar with Jim's background, the organization that Jim led for probably 25 years, the Village Network, is a similar kind of organization that is a member of the Ohio Children's Alliance. So we have 81 community agencies all around Ohio, including some in the Worthington, Dublin area, that comprise the Ohio Children's Alliance. We were founded back in the early 1970s because those organizations, many of which are old orphanages, they needed an organization to advance their practice, to represent them to the state government, and to just help build a better system of care for the kids and families that those organizations served. That's kind of why we started about 45 years ago. And I'm the third leader of the organization, and I've been pleased to have this role for about 9 years so far. So today I'm going to talk about COVID and foster care. And I want to educate you on how the systems responded, but I also want to challenge you all to get involved, because the central theme that I'll leave you with is we have more problems and we don't have nearly enough solutions, and we need help, and we need more than money, we need ideas. So today there's about 17,000 kids all across Ohio that are in the foster care system. That means that Children's Services has worked with their families and has taken the bold step of taking legal custody of those children into the agency's care and placing those children in someone else's home or facility. Usually when that happens, several months pass and the agency works with that family to help them resolve issues, which are usually drug abuse kind of issues, and the kids return. But for a lot of kids, the issues are far more severe. Sometimes the parents have passed away, or they're in prison, or they're just not capable of caring for the kids. So for a number of these reasons, there are just tons of kids that are in the foster care system in Ohio. And while the goal of the whole system is to keep the family strong and prevent them from entering foster care, or if they enter foster care, to try to bring them home, every kid and every family situation is different. So we have agencies all across Ohio that serve these kids and these families. They serve them in foster homes. They serve them in mental health facilities. And they also support kinship care, which is usually grandma or grandpa that have stepped up to care for these kids that are in the children's services custody until they can go back, hopefully, to mom or dad. So our organization represents these community agencies that serve these 17,000 kids, but they serve even more kids. They serve families in an attempt to keep them strong and prevent kids from ever entering foster care. They serve families after the fact, after kids come home. They help adoptive families secure an adoption and support them to keep those new families strong. And then they provide mental health services to kids, to about 75,000 kids all across Ohio, in their homes, in their communities, and even in their schools. So we try to advance our ability of strengthening families in many different ways, but foster care is, one of the largest parts of our world. So a year ago, when I made a presentation to the Westerville Rotary, we were talking about the opioid crisis and how this crisis is plaguing communities and causing addiction in families where they have never before even faced drug use issues. The opioid epidemic has led to about a 4,000 kid increase in foster care. In fact, if you go even further back, before we even knew the term opioid epidemic, there was only about 10,000 kids in foster care, but today there's 17,000. So really over time, our system hasn't kept pace. We have adjusted. We're providing a lot more family strengthening services and helping families overcome opioid abuse and preventing abuse. But we still haven't stemmed the tide, and we have 17,000 kids in our children's services custody that are served mostly in our agency's networks. So that was the old challenge, which is still an incredible challenge that we can't forget. But COVID has added a whole new twist to how our community agencies try to solve their community problems. So I'm going to give you just a preview of some of their challenges, and maybe some of you will have ideas that spring to mind. So first, we have about 3,000 kids in foster care that are living in mental health facilities or group homes. And if you think of the worst place to live during the COVID epidemic or pandemic, it's congregate facilities. And what we find is that our staff bring COVID into the facilities and spread it. So despite all of the precautions we take, there are still staff who don't know that they have COVID, and they show up to work and they unknowingly spread it to their employees and to the kids. So we've had several outbreaks, but you don't hear about them. You don't hear about them on the news. because for whatever reason, when the kids in our facilities get COVID, they don't even know it. They very rarely even have symptoms. That's not true for all children, but for the kids in our child welfare system in Ohio, we've been pretty lucky so far. So when there are outbreaks, it's usually the staff that are struggling the most and who are hospitalized. But so far, we haven't had any known deaths of kids or staff due to COVID that are in these mental health kind of facilities. But we have an incredible challenge. We've finally kept up pace with having personal protective equipment like face masks for all the staff. But for the first 2 months, we were scrambling, and we had like My Very Own Blanket nonprofit in Westerville. Their volunteers sewing masks for us to give to the facilities. It was quite the crisis. We had I was shipping out hand sanitizer that I could get donated to different facilities because they were so low. And then foster homes have about 14,000 of these kids living in foster home settings. And if you can imagine the anxieties that you all have about being around children or being around others, imagine being a foster parent while COVID hit and having that dilemma of, how do I keep these kids safe and have my home be a safe place for kids during a pandemic when their lives are even more chaotic? But how do I also balance not getting COVID myself from kids who have been at home and different facilities? So we've found that foster parents are, many of them aren't willing to take new placements. And after kids leave their home, they want to hold off on having more placements. It's also incredibly challenging to recruit new families to sign up to become foster parents because of COVID-related concerns that they have, not just for themselves, but their own children in their own home. So at a time when we needed more homes because of the surge of kids coming into our system, partly due to the opioid crisis, COVID has caused so much more problems because we cannot keep pace. So what happens when we don't have enough homes is kids are bounced around more often. Kids are being placed in mental health institutions that don't need to be. They don't have that level of care, but there's literally nowhere else for them to go. Kids are staying in their parents' homes, even though Children's Services has custody, because Children's Services doesn't have a safer place for them to go, which is ironic. So our system is trying to adapt and really trying to focus on utilizing grandparents and kin so that we don't have to rely on foster homes. But we have a major problem now, and kids aren't doing well because of it. So just a couple more things about how we've responded, and then I would love to hear your feedback and your questions. Is telehealth and Zoom meetings like this has become a new normal for how we serve families. So we check in on foster families through Zoom. We check in on the kids through Zoom when it's not safe to actually be there in person. We're providing mental health services primarily through Zoom and similar platforms when it's not safe or practical for us to be in a kid's families, in their homes. So we've been able to get a lot of funding through different funders to equip our agencies with telehealth and with Zoom platforms, and also equip their clients, their kids and families, with devices, which we found to be the greatest challenge. Getting our agencies to use telehealth was a big deal. But when you have low-income families and all they have is mom's cell phone that's connected to a 3G network or the home Wi-Fi, it's really hard to provide therapy to a child when there's only one phone, one device in the home that can even connect to Zoom. So we're kind of scrambling, and we're doing a pretty good job. But our biggest problem today is that there just isn't enough places for these kids to go. So I'd love to say that we're solving it, but the opioid crisis is still here. It's not the headlines anymore, but it's still happening. We still have about 17,000 kids in our child welfare system, and they just aren't in the kinds of homes and kinds of places that are really suited to meet their needs and to support their family reunification. So I wish I had better news for you. We are working incredibly hard, and it's amazing how quickly our system has shifted, but we haven't caught up. We haven't caught up to the needs, and COVID doesn't seem to be going away quickly. We all have our best guesses of when a vaccine is rapidly deployable in Ohio, but until that date, what do I expect major changes to happen? So this could be another 12 months. So we need really good ideas of how we can better serve these kids and recruit more individuals to open their homes to serve these kids. So thanks again, and I apologize. This is kind of a depressing topic, but it's a critically important topic that impacts not just kids in the low-income pockets throughout Ohio, but kids and families in the Worthington and Dublin area as well. So I'm going to go on pause, and I'd love to hear your questions and your feedback, time permitting.
So Mark, are the school districts where the kids are in foster care homes able to support your mission somewhat through their support of technology and things like that, or what's the role?
Honestly, it's been an underwhelming response from public schools. And, we have like 1,000 school districts and 10,000 schools in Ohio. So the responses vary. But imagine, being a foster parent, and then COVID happens, and you kind of deal with the last school year ending early. But then with this school year, a lot of schools are still all virtual or half virtual. And what that means for a foster parent is these kids never leave your house. and these kids have a lot of behavioral problems to begin with. So that's just making it so much more difficult for a foster parent to do their job and to have each kid log in on separate devices at the right time of the day. So schools haven't really been incredibly helpful to help the foster parents and foster kids manage their educational needs. And I understand, I'm a parent with kids, and it's incredibly difficult to be a school administrator or teacher these days. But we need help on that front as well.
Are other states suffering about the same way that Ohio is?
Yeah, no state has figured it out. Some states have had a lot worse outbreaks than we did. A lot of states have more kids proportionally in facilities than we do. So we're fortunate that most of our kids are in home settings. So some other states have had worse problems, worse outbreaks, and more strain on facility staff. Because once a facility has an outbreak, what you see is a lot of the direct service employees don't want to work there anymore. And then, who wants to work at a place that just had or currently has a COVID outbreak? So we haven't had, to the degree other states have, had those workforce challenges in our facilities, knock on wood. But unfortunately, we're not aware of great solutions from other states that we can necessarily build upon quite yet.
So Mark, first of all, I can hear just the tiredness and the exhaustion in your voice, because I know this is a very difficult problem to solve with no easy answers. So I just want to thank you, on behalf of myself and the club, for all the efforts you guys are doing for these kids. It's much appreciated. I know, you mentioned that right now you're doing things on Zoom. So I'm curious kind of how the adoption has been with, these parents and these kids. Like, is technology a major barrier, or for the most part, is it working okay? And kind of the second part of that is, are you using a tool called Doxy.me, or are you familiar with it?
So great question. One of the good things that's come out of this is, why haven't we used Zoom before COVID? Why aren't we using Zoom to facilitate more interactions between kids in foster care and their mom and dad and aunts and uncles? Like, this should be a daily exercise that we use with kids to connect them with their family and extended family. So that's a good thing that's come out of this, is kids actually have more interactions with their biological parents while in foster care. It's just virtual. For the most part, the service delivery through Zoom is working. Where it doesn't work well is kids with very severe, intensive mental health problems. It's hard to engage them for more than like 20 minutes. And especially outside of foster care, just other families that are low income, it's hard to engage them if they're, using their mom's cell phone and everyone else needs to borrow it too. So it's not realistic to meet the mental health needs of kids with really severe problems, regardless of how you do it through Zoom. And that software that you mentioned, it sounds familiar. We don't only use Zoom. Our providers use a few different platforms too, but I'm not very familiar with that one. So maybe I could learn more about that later.
Yeah, thank you.
Mark, you said that one of your pressing needs was the identification of foster homes. How do the organizations that you work with typically identify prospective foster care providers? And is there a typical profile of a foster care provider?
Great question. Our foster care agencies utilize multiple different pathways to promote the concept of foster parenting and recruit individuals. The most effective way is peer-to-peer, having current foster parents reach out to their family and friends to enlist them. We did partner with the governor's office to launch a new foster parent website marketing initiative, and it's been mildly helpful. But it's, it really hasn't made much of a dent in meeting the needs of foster kids. So you'll see yard signs, you'll see some radio ads, but for the most part, all the research shows that you get your best bang for your buck to equip your current cadre of foster parents with resources to recruit others.
Mark, one of the things, well, actually, this is two questions. One of the issues that I was aware of is that reimbursements in the state come generally through the counties in foster care and residential care. And those are fixed rates for the whole year. And we end up with a pandemic where you've already indicated the amount of electronic devices need to increase. There are many more expenses that are probably increasing for both the residential and foster care programs. Illness of staff in residential is going to go up. all of those areas are, but in the past, their rates were capped for a full year, and there was nothing you could do about it. Has that changed to adjust is the first question. And the second deals with visitation. And have we changed the rules in terms of requiring visitation over time, so that parents don't have to expose themselves as much as what would have previously been required? Because having a child go in and out of your home to visit a family who may in fact have COVID probably puts them at, especially the older foster family, which we have many, into really pretty hefty health risks.
Yeah, great question. All the new money that's been helpful to addressing COVID for the most part has come through Congress. And Congress can borrow money they don't have. So they keep funneling hundreds of billions of dollars to states. And that's been incredibly helpful. And a lot of that funding has gone to mental health agencies because it's tied to the Medicaid program. So those agencies have gotten anywhere from tens of thousands to maybe $100,000 over the last few months. No strings attached. And that's been really, really helpful. But in Ohio, we can't borrow money we don't have. It says it in our Constitution. And what happened during COVID is less people are working, less people are buying things. So our state government has less revenue from sales tax and payroll tax. So we don't have extra money. We have the opposite situation. So all the state agencies have to deal with cuts. So state agencies that oversee child welfare have less money to work with now. So that's a challenging part of this. So no, we haven't seen new influx of money to help these agencies, these facilities, or the foster homes. There's no increases. If anything, it's staying the same or going down. And then your question about visitation is, we did work with state government to make sure that they loosened up their regulations so that no one has to do in-person visitation when they don't truly need to. So most of the visits of families or kids in foster homes are permitted to be done virtually, like through Zoom. But they still often see them, often at least once a month in person. And when they do, it's often meeting in the front yard, sitting in lawn chairs instead of going in the house. So they've adapted pretty well to visiting enough and getting what you need out of visits.
Mark, what could service clubs do to help? Aside from being a foster parent, is there a way to like adopt a child via like supply them with clothing or games or even laptops, anything like that?
Great question, Peggy. Yes, so there are some local organizations in Dublin, Worthington area actually that serve dozens or over 100 foster kids, and they accept donated goods. So things like tablets, laptops, phones, prepaid wireless cards, all those kinds of things that have to do with technology are in really high demand. So one thing I can do, I can follow up with Jim and send you a list of a few organizations that are either based in Dublin, Worthington, or have large programs with offices there, where you may, be able to do that kind of thing. That's a really good idea.
Other questions, comments?
you considered public-private like partnerships? I know there's a lot of commercial things that are like buildings that are having issues or something that can help you guys out with, I would say, you're busting out all over issues. Because I know office spaces have declined significantly thanks to COVID. Has there any ideas down that line?
Great question. One of our largest members, the Buckeye Ranch, which is based in Columbus, they just moved into this brand new giant facility in March, and now it's like 2/3 empty. So our member organizations are all facing the dilemma of having all this property and having all these leases and significantly underutilizing them. So we haven't figured that part out yet, but we are scrambling to either like negotiate different terms with landlords or sell portions of our property, because even after COVID, like the long-term effect of a lot of this is we don't need all this office space. Tons of our employees can work from home, or just have some workspace where they don't need their own dedicated, office. So I don't know if I answer your question directly. We don't have a lot of great ideas yet, but this is really causing organizations to rethink how they utilize property to run their organizations.
It was mainly for the kids. I mean, I'm assuming you're having a lot of kids coming in and you're having issues placing them with people. I mean, I guess the question, I hate to bring back orphanages, but has there been ideas down that line to help with the overrunning of kids, and maybe somebody that comes in and runs that facility for them to help them out in that way?
So it may get to the point where we're having those types of conversations, but so far we have enough of these institutional beds, these like residential treatment facilities. So many of them are running at capacity or near capacity. So unless there's another major influx, I think we have enough capacity there. And again, we're serving too many kids in that level of care that don't need to be there. So our primary goal is to find more home-based situations through kin and family networks, so that we don't have a crisis of needing to like open up a new state-run orphanage or something like that. But it's definitely within the realm of possibility, and I'm hopeful we don't go there.
I understand. All right, thank you.
Mark, one of the concepts that worked well at one point was the whole concept that a church, especially, but other organizations, would identify that they would take on the task of recruiting and supporting at least one foster family. And that may be something that can be moved to a business orientation, with employees beginning to look for and assist in identifying. If I'm an employee and a person that doesn't feel they can do foster care, but I can go out and talk to my family and friends to identify a potential foster home. And it's our goal would be then to find, at least for our business, one new foster family for the organization, for an organization. That's a collaborative that can be done, because I would guess that most of the folks on this Zoom call had no idea the seriousness of what we're facing and why we're facing it at this point.
Thanks, Jim. That's a really good concept. There are some church run programs, including one called Open Table, where the church basically adopts, some families or some kids that are in foster care for the long term. And that concept can really be taken to scale in Ohio. And I think that's also an interesting idea about leveraging the business community to do the same kind of thing that some churches do. Thanks for that idea. I think I can definitely do something with that.
Any other questions? I want to thank you, Mark. I think we all can say that we appreciate your bringing our awareness up regarding something that, because of the media not covering it, because there are so many other things going on, that we need to be aware of the significance of the problems. And thank you so much for speaking today.
You're very welcome. Thank you guys for caring about this issue and for inviting me. And I'll follow up with Jim with a few suggested local nonprofits. Thanks.
Thank you.
Bye.
So next week's speaker is Bill Hall, and he will be speaking on Melissa's House, a campaign for help. So that's our speaker, not next week, but the first week in November. So if you plan to check in on Zoom next week, you may find yourself without many folks checking in also, unless I hear an outcry, let's just do a virtual 10 minutes or 15 minutes. We will not be having a meeting next week. Stay tuned for a potential rah-rah. So.
And it's October, not November,
Right.
as stated.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yes, the first week of October. I keep thinking about the scheduling of speakers, and we're at this point. You have a speaker suggestion. We are scheduling in November. We haven't filled the month of November yet, but we are scheduling for November. In closing, I would like to ask everyone to follow me and unmute yourself. And let's give, even though it may be a little awkward, let's go ahead and give the 4-way test. And of the things we think, say, and do, 1.
Is it the
The
truth?
truth.
2.
Is it fair to all concerned?
3. Will it
Build
build
goodwill
and better friendships?
4. Will it be
beneficial to all
are
concerned?
So thank you all. You can hang around for a bit if you want to just chat. That would be appreciated. Take care and have a good 2 weeks.